Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought I would talk today about Commander's Views, and the reason why is because it's one of the more recently added mechanics, and also it's definitely an interesting one thinking about the future. Now, one thing must be pointed out when it comes to mechanics in War Thunder. Generally, when they're implemented, they change quite a lot when it goes into the future in subsequent patches. Basically, the idea is if you remember when radar was first implemented into the game, it was completely different to what it is now. It is much more sophisticated now. It takes into account much more factors. It works a lot better, and that took a hell of a long time and a lot of development. And when we look at this Commander's View, it is probably the first iteration of it, and then it's going to get improved going forward. So I thought, why not put a video out there talking about my experiences with Commander View, my thoughts on it, and some little improvements to make from it. Because right now, my general view of it is that I'm disappointed in the mechanic itself and its usability. I don't even have it bound to my gunner view stuff, so it doesn't cycle through it, or my bino stuff. Instead, I have it bound to a separate button because I hardly ever use it. And the major reason is because its usability is nowhere near as good as the gunner view, and nowhere near as good as the bino view because it lacks specific features. It's only really usable on very certain vehicles. Stuff such as certain ATGM carriers it works alright on, stuff like the Bradley or the Marder IFV, and the reason is because it's a little bit higher than the gunner position, and therefore you can keep your crew safe while you use it. There is still an issue with this though. Generally, especially in the Marder, if you get shot where the commander's thing is, it will set off the ammo and kill your crew anyway, so it doesn't actually help with survivability, but it does mean that it's just easier to throw the ATGM in, since the ATGM is nearly at the level of the commander view. So overall, on the majority of vehicles, it's pretty much useless, apart from a very specific few, but even then, it's not too useful. The main issue with it is too slow in rotation. It's very jarring having a fast turret or a fast horizontal drive and also an incredibly fast bino view that you can whip around and keep the gun to, and then have this slow and clunky commander's view. It generally also doesn't offer stabilization, which makes it feel even more janky going from a stabilized gunner position or a fast bino position to the commander position where you have neither, and the only thing you can maybe get is maybe commander thermals, which you can already get in the gunner's sight the vast majority of the time for the high-ranking vehicles. So what ends up happening is you kind of have the worst of both worlds. You know, you don't have the stabilization, you don't have the speed of these things. Instead, what you have is just a slow, jarring square box, which is hard to use. You also don't even get the best view of the battlefield. That still comes with the bino view. The only thing that the commanders does is take away the thermals from the bino view, and I actually think this is a positive change because it limits the use of the thermals and actually makes them a little bit more realistic, but also it makes them a little bit less usable. The one of the huge things that I found at top tier when spading stuff like the STRF 9040 Bill, the other machines such as the Leclerc when it had commander's thermals, the Leopard 2A5, any high-ranking scout with the bino thermals at the time, they were so much easier to play than the opposite ones, mainly because it was just a lot easier to pick targets. You could laser range find them, work out their distance, and then pop a hill, bang, and then back again. At least with the commander's view, you have to actually You have to actually be able to, push yourself out there, so therefore they're going to see the top of your commander's view. And with thermals being taken away from the bino view, it means that spotting stuff such as exhausts and things like that when individuals are behind hills is harder to do. And this means that there's a little bit more skill involved. And one of the problems that Top Tier has had for, I would say, 1 to 2 to 3 years now, is everything they're adding to it dumbs down the skill level of the game. And generally, for me, I'm not a player who's largely skilled. I would put myself as a pretty average tanker. But at the same time, when I do well, I like thinking about the fact that, yes, I had an impact here and it was because of the stuff I did, instead of the mechanics of my vehicle itself, making it very, very simple to play. It's why going from a high-ranking vehicle to a mid-ranking vehicle can be a little bit of a shock, because you actually lose a bunch of mechanics from high ranks which make the game easier to play, such as now the most recent addition, the automatic rangefinder in high-ranking vehicles. But I'm happy that they removed the thermals from the bino view, just to make it a little bit harder to scout stuff, just make it a little bit harder to spot stuff. Now you actually have to expose yourself, at least in some way, to be able to do stuff. And talking about scouting as well, you aren't able to scout from the commander's view. Or I don't know if this is bugged, or I don't know if this is how it's supposed to be. It just seems really odd to me that this is the case. Why? I understand. So in the bino view, you can scout individuals. That makes sense. You're using binos, you're spotting targets. But you can also scout people from the gunner view. Now, if you're going to make it so the commander can't scout, who is the guy supposedly out of the top of the tank with the binos scouting people, then why is it that he can't scout while he's in the commander view, and the gunner can scout even though he is in the gunner view? So it's very, very weird to me that the mechanic of scouting has not found itself in the commander view, because it makes complete sense to put it there. So hopefully that gets changed at some point. Then the next one is another. I think this is a bug as well, and I'm sure it'll be fixed because it's incredibly jarring. Basically, when you quick switch between views, sometimes the gun doesn't fully line up with the commander's view, creating this jarring effect where the game takes about a second to jump to the correct position on where the gun is firing. This is when your commander can take control of the gun, and sometimes when you move the commander view and then move back to the gunner position, what ends up happening is the gun isn't actually lined up with the commander view, and then there's like a half a second to a second delay where the gun will just snap into position, meaning that it looks really jarring, and also it means that you might shoot where your gun is not looking. So that has to be addressed. I'm sure it will be at some point. It's really, really annoying. And also, using the gun in commander view is generally quite hard at the higher echelons, mainly because it's hard to judge the lay of the gun compared to the cover that you're using. Most games at high ranks where this mechanic is most prominent, you don't have a situation where people are running around, crazily, being super aggressive. Generally, what you end up having is people taking power positions, trying to get there aggressively at start of matches, and then you have to try and dig them out, whether it's with other tanks when they decide to try and push forward, or you flank them, or just outshoot them. Whether it's with helicopters or planes to try and dig them out, or artillery or something. But generally that's what happens in these games. And while people are in those positions, you're normally surrounded by rocks, you're normally surrounded by cover, you're trying to keep your tank down, so therefore you don't get shot. And with that said, what ends up happening in these situations is it's very hard to tell the lay of the gun from where you're using it with the commander. So when you laser range find somebody at a certain range, then you try and pop out to use the gun. The majority of the time you just shoot the the massive ground in front of you, or you'll overexpose yourself because you are overcompensating for the gun itself, and then you get shot and you die. This makes the commander view very rough to use because it's hard to judge where you are actually sat, and once again, while you're moving around, the stabilization of the commander's view also has an issue with it, while you're moving from place to place, which really does suck. Then the main positive of the commander's view, though, is that it's not actually down to the view itself. It's the fact that the commander can take the controls of the gunner after the gunner is incapacitated. So if you shoot a gunner in high ranks now, the majority of the time the target that you shot will be able to shoot back without any of the components being hit. And this is because the commander is taking over the gunner's position in the form of the controls. And I kind of like this because it means now kill shots on vehicles or, maiming vehicles, you have to put a little bit more thought into it instead of just shooting the same place every time, which has basically been how you play top tier for a very long time now. You either breach vehicles and then have a round that goes through the breach and kills the turret, or what you do is you go for the driver gunner shot and then you finish them off with a second, generally through the center of the vehicle. And this is a meta that just hasn't developed at all for a long time, and now with the commander's view set, it's now developed slightly in a different way. Now there's no reason not to shoot the breach or the center of the vehicle, so now everybody just shoots center mass and annihilates the center, then sets up for repairs. You're going to reload faster, you're going to kill the vehicle. It's pretty much as simple as that. So at least there's been a little bit of a meta change, even if it has made stuff more uniform. I would say, though, when it comes to the gunner and the commander view, what I would do personally is I would make it so when the gunner dies, there is like a little bit of a lag between taking over the controls from the commander. Right now it is instantaneous, so if your gunner dies, you still have complete control of the whole situation yourself. And I think personally it would be better if there was just like half a second to a second there where that didn't happen, just to simulate the commander actually getting the control of the guns straighter, instead of just instantaneous, especially after one of his crewmates has just been blown apart. I also don't even think it's worth one of the things that the commander's view does is if you have bushes on it, it means that you can't see through the bushes. I actually don't think the commander's view is even worth using to the point of unbushing that area of your vehicle, so therefore you can see through that area. So for me, when I look at the commander view, there's not really much point in using it. The fact that the commander's view, gets covered by a bush and it can't see, but the gunner's view, you can still see through the bush is, it's one of the problems, I suppose, with ground realistic, which could go either way. You either make it so the commander's view doesn't get blocked by bushes, or you make it so the gunner's view does get blocked by bushes. It's kind of as simple as that. But for me, the commander's view right now is pretty useless. It doesn't have that much of a use in game. Hopefully going forward it will do. I'm sure it will as the mechanic gets more developed and it gets more stuff added to it. But right now it is quite janky and not very useful to use, and only provides a secondary thing, which is nice, which is the ability for the commander to take over the gun controls. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank BRFC, Swollen Ostrich, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Conte Baraka, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Lafouche, Barine, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.